you. Well, good afternoon, as I said, everybody. I'm Leisa. I'm a senior lecturer in forensic science at De Montfort University in Leicester. I've been working in forensic science for about 20 years, and I've taught forensic science at further education, so college setting, university setting, and I've also trained people in forensic science. You're very welcome today. Thank you for joining us and thank you for bearing with us. Here we go. So my section is based on crime scenes, and to give you an overview of this presentation, we know that we have a varied audience today, and thank you for tuning in wherever you are. I've come up with a few thoughts on how we can respond to COVID-19 using what resources you currently have, and also looking at novel approaches. I'm looking at this if you are on campus, so if you're in a college or university setting, or you have a training facility, if you've got your students or trainees with you there and then. I've also considered if people are at home, so they're remote from you, and also if there are online resources that you can use. So having a blended approach for this. I've also considered accreditation requirements. So the international standard accreditation, currently police forces in the UK are undergoing accreditation for 17020, which is an inspection standard. So it's not 17025, which is the laboratory standard. So I've tried to adhere to that for this presentation, and also the Chartered Society of Forensic Sciences, the accreditation requirements for crime scene investigation, if that's relevant for you. So moving on, just to give you an overview of the setting where I work in Leicester in the UK, De Montfort University, we have a crime scene house. So to the left of your screen, we have a laboratory, we have a court, and we do have a vehicle as well, access for our students. We also like to look at novel techniques. So we have this facility called the Cube, and it's an immersive virtual reality facility, 4 different projectors, and we have a camera with 4 lenses, and it's basically a room, so we can recreate a crime scene, very useful for reconstruction and also peer review, feedback, critique. And so these are some of the facilities that we hope to be able to use when we return to campus. Although we'll have social distancing in place, we need to consider, are there other alternatives that we could use? So having a look at some of the resources available to us, I've started to explore that these might be useful to you. So if you were to do your training or your education for crime scene investigation on campus, there's a new app that's available. I've downloaded this myself, and if you are an educational institution, you can obtain a license for more than one user. It's called Crime Scene Assistant, so that there is a fee required, but I feel like this is very useful for accreditation. It goes through quality processes. You can access the information from the perspective of police, from medics, from fire investigators, and also other responders, and it includes how to approach volume crime scenes, major crime scenes, even sexual offences. So for those of you undergoing accreditation, this might be useful for you. And to be able to facilitate such an app, if you were with your trainees or students, you might consider purchasing some headsets and a tablet type device to download the app to. That way, with everyone wearing full PPE, communication would be enabled to be able to understand what people are saying, and it also facilitates people working in small groups. And if you've got a tablet, it's very easy to clean and such like, so useful for our response to COVID-19. Now, if your students or trainees are at home, then it's always useful for them to be able to record scenes wherever they are in their own setting. So, for example, photographing their home environment or outside space, photography from 4 different perspectives. So if you imagine 4 compass points looking into a room, and perhaps they might video with a phone or video camera that they have to hand, measuring the room. Very useful to be accurate, obviously, at crime scenes, and to be able to draw or capture the scene plan. So this is, obviously, we've got these types of resources to hand already, but how can we take that forward? Well, we always need to consider that as our students and our trainees need to capture scenes in different lighting conditions, so day and night. You might want them to capture residential scenes, perhaps outdoor scenes as well, industrial scenes. And one of the things I've been looking at is apps using augmented reality. So where students and trainees can access these using a mobile phone in a similar way to if you were to participate in Pokemon Go or the Google Animals. I don't know if any of you have had that at home, where you can use your device in your own space. So myself and my colleagues have used this quite effectively, and one of the apps that we found, which is free to use, is called Magic Plan. This is actually an app that's designed for construction and architecture, but it does have a facility for crime investigation and fire investigation, so useful for mapping a scene, as it were. So, and there's an online cloud as well, so your students could be able to create this in their own space. It's quite simple to use. You just have to wave your phone around in the setting. So this is my home office area, and you can create a 2D image of an environment. So, for example, this could be a bedroom. You can add the furniture in. So there's all these different choices. It gives you the measurements and also the height of the room as well. Very important to capture that, obviously, at crime scenes. And it can convert it into 3D space as well. So this is a free type of app, and there's quite a few of these readily available. These work on Android or Apple devices as well. So something to consider. Moving on, if you had a facility like the ones I showed you that are based at De Montfort University, it might be difficult for some of your trainees or students to access the campus as we return in the new academic year. They might be still social distancing, they might be shielding, they might have other responsibilities. So one of the things I've been looking at is whether you can create your crime scene space. So, for example, at DMU, we have a terraced house. Can you create that for students to experience before they come back to campus, so they get to know the layout of the environment? And also, this could be useful for students who can't physically attend the crime scene. Again, you can create the furniture that you want. Apologies for my choice of decor in wallpaper and tiles. I was trying to show that you can do different effects, but you can basically create an animated interior of a property, and you can also create 2D plans and 3D plans as well. You'll notice that I've included vehicles in this scene. So we've got a bicycle and a car. They're important considerations for the accreditation with the Charter Society, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. But here you can see you can create a space that your students can access, they can get used to prior to coming to the crime scene, or they can experience it away from campus. This takes me on to vehicles. Now, in my time in forensic science, vehicles are one of my favourite things to examine, as it were, because they were so useful for us in investigations. They obviously link scenes, people to vehicles, animals to vehicles, other vehicles to vehicles, so they're very useful for us in forensic science. I've always used vehicles in my teaching and in my training resources. So whether you're looking at volume crime, so vehicle type crime, or major investigations, vehicles can play a part. And you don't have to create new resources for every single case. My suggestion would be to take some standard photographs of your vehicle or a video, and then adapt it to the case that you want your students to consider. The one thing about vehicles I will say is it requires students to learn different terminology. For instance, here are some of the terms that might be familiar to you. I've tried to consider our people attending today from whichever country you're in, so apologies if you're not familiar with some of these terms. And also vehicles come with numerous hazards. So for example, if an airbag's not deployed, that could be a hazard if a student was examining or examining a vehicle. You might want to think about the hazardous materials inside the vehicle, such as petrol, brake fluid, diesel, such like. So but these are the sorts of hazards that you'd want students to consider and do a risk assessment for. Vehicles require a different search approach. In my experience of training people to examine vehicles, I break it up into zones. And commonly what we would do is break it up into near side and offside. And I've got an example of that coming up in the next slide. Then to examine the boot area or trunk, whatever you refer to it as a separate area, and also the front of the vehicle. So you possibly have 6 areas of a car, obviously more if it's a larger vehicle. Vehicles are excellent for students to enable them to understand the order of examination. By that I mean what comes first. So for example, the headrest of a vehicle, you might want the students to examine for skin flakes before hairs, before fibres and such like. So you can make your resources adaptable. But the evidential traces are phenomenal in vehicles. So you could get your students to examine for soil and environmental traces such as pollen. You can also consider paint, glass traces, other types of trace evidence. So very useful. Okay, so here's an example of a typical type of vehicle that I've adapted. So the photographs obviously came first. I've just annotated it. This is actually the driver's side, so I call it offside. This is a right sided vehicle, so it's a UK vehicle where we the steering wheel is in the right of the vehicle. I call it the front offside footwell. It's important that students and trainees differentiate the different sections of a vehicle. So it's encouraging people to consider when they're labelling fibre tapes, for example, or debris collection, which footwell did the debris come from? So it's really important that they can link it back to the right area of their vehicle. Now, one of the other things that you can consider is using 3D models. Now, in this presentation, I can't actually move these items for you, but these are all accessible from PowerPoint. They're freely available and they enable your students, so you could annotate your photographs with these and let your students or trainees have access to them. So there's a range of items on here. It's very useful for vehicles though, because especially if you want them to consider the underside of a vehicle, the wheel arches, the tyres and such like. Okay, so another thing you might consider in relation to vehicles and other types of offences, this is a simulated reconstruction of CCTV. So I filmed this myself. So this is not a crime in action, this is a reconstruction. So and hopefully this will play. It's only about 15 seconds long. So we have a van in the image, and when I filmed this footage, it's actually in colour. I've converted it to black and white, and it can actually be very useful for students and trainees to witness, watch the footage, look at what are the forensic potential, where can we possibly target for the investigation to optimise any evidence that might be recoverable. So as we can see in the footage, a possible tool has been dropped. So I would show this to my trainees and students. They would watch the footage and then assess the situation. Where are our forensic options and possibilities? Okay, so I'll just move to the next slide. So the reason I feel that these settings are useful is because it allows students and trainees to have experiential learning. They're actually involved in the case, as we all do in our teaching and training environments. But it's important it enables critical thinking. And with regards to vehicles in particular, health and safety, risk assessment, essential for any crime scene investigation, but it puts a different perspective on it when we're considering a vehicle and people are actually getting into the exhibit, as it were. So very useful opportunities. Okay, so some other ideas for online learning. Obviously, we can communicate now via Teams, so you can create an online briefing type situation as if you were doing a case conference. Your students or trainees may approach this as a team or solo working. You can use different resources for incident boards. So you could create Microsoft Sway, or another one is Padlet, where you can have people create their incident board, as in an interactive whiteboard, as it were. Also, you can use software for interactive case files. You might consider doing an Excel spreadsheet as an investigation budget. So you lock the spreadsheet and your students or trainees have a certain investigation income source to use for that investigation. And likewise, you can use Google Forms for your continuity and scene logs as well. Okay, another one that I've been looking at is looking at gamification in crime scene investigation. These tend to form two or three main types of approaches. You have an escape room ethos, which people have to try and obviously exit the property. Evidence search, so looking for the items. This one in particular that I've shown here is actually from the Virtual Museum of Canada. And the reason I like this is because it involves questioning. People have to justify their rationale, and it brings into the perspective that you have to consider your ethical position to avoid bias. So it's very useful. And also it's important that we consider different criminal justice systems as well. So, you know, if a resource is not specifically for your criminal justice system, it doesn't mean that, in my opinion, you shouldn't use it. It gives people the opportunity to learn of another situation from another country. And one of the final things I'll talk about is virtual reality. So how we can use this and the technology within our crime scene investigation. So you can do this in numerous ways. You can simulate a crime scene, and you can have the bespoke technical equipment. So for example, at DMU, we have Rico theta cameras. You can have alternative 360 devices that capture the crime scene. You can purchase visor headsets. You can even purchase some more affordable models that attach to a phone or tablet device, which are like cardboard in appearance. One of the most, I suppose, easy ways of you to access such a resource is to start by using Google Earth. It enables you to create panoramic images and 360 degree. I'm going to show you one in just a second of an outdoor space near where I live in the UK. And one of the things that we're looking at DMU is a software called Adobe Captivate, and using the Creative Cloud to create immersive software for our students to access. So I'll show you some images, and if we have time at the end of our session today, I can demonstrate the virtual reality for you. There was a paper published recently in Science and Justice relating to virtual reality for teaching and learning in crime scene investigation, and it's in a journal called Science and Justice, so excellent paper. So the top image, here we go. This is a lane, countryside lane near to where I live. This is captured via Google Earth. Basically, you take separate images and then Google Earth links them all together as one seamless image. So really fantastic and freely available for your students to access. and this is Adobe Captivate. I've gone for a different type of setting rather than a house. This is like an industrial type setting, and what Adobe Captivate allows you to do, it allows your trainees or students to actually be immersed in the setting. So you can put them into this 3D space. And you can create these little hotspots that people click on, and it asks either a question, it prompts people to what to do. So it's very immersive, very engaging, and hopefully optimize the learning experience. So that's it from me. I hope these have given you some great ideas. Thank you for your time today, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thanks, that's so great, Leisa. Fantastic. So we do have some questions. Leisa, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Fantastic. So our first question is actually from a criminology student. They'd like to undertake a career as a CSI, and at the moment they're obviously in their final year. So they'd like to know if they need to do a particular degree or whether they could start specific training and to kickstart their CSI career.
Okay, so what I would suggest you do is possibly look at studying a master's in crime scene investigation. Depending on what modules you've studied already in your criminology degree, you might have the requirements to enter this career directly, but I always suggest you look at studying a master's. If you go to the website of the Chartered Society of Forensic Sciences, they will have a list of all the courses that are accredited, master's courses in the UK, and there are some in other countries as well. So you could look at that and see if there's something that appeals to your interest, and I would go from there and be a member of the Chartered Society as well, because it enables you to network with some amazing people.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. So we have another question. Has drone technology been used in crime scene investigation yet? Fitted with multiple cameras, I can imagine drones could obtain a wealth of information from scenes.
Yes, absolutely. So the Cube, which is one of the facilities that we have at DMU, that enables you to actually use the aerial devices such as a drone. Apologies, I should have mentioned that. You can recreate that in the Cube. So drone type devices enable you to have a fantastic image of a scene, because obviously it allows you to examine the top of buildings and such like, and give you an overview of a scene. So it's a critical part now, I would say, of crime scene investigation. So if you are fortunate to be able to use that in your training delivery or in your education, then obviously you would have to be validated to use that in actual crime scene investigations, as all our techniques have to be validated and verified. But yes, absolutely, it's a fantastic resource.
That's great. So Eva had a question around the Crime Scene Assist app. And they were wondering whether it was available for researchers and experts who aren't students.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really, if you go to your app store on your device, whether it's an Android device or a Apple device, you're looking for Crime Scene Assistant app, and you will find it there. You have to pay, forgive me, I can't remember how much it is. There is a cost to using the app, and institutions can obtain a institutional license, as it were, for multiple users of the device, of the app. Yeah.
That's great, absolutely. It's something that we're exploring at Staffordshire as well. So we also had a question coming in. Do the training scenarios require installation of different software on the computers? It's an interesting concept, and interested to know how it could be delivered to law enforcement agencies across Eastern Europe, for example.
Yeah, so the software that I demonstrated there, particularly the last one, and I'm hoping if we have time today, I've got it ready to go to show you. That's Adobe Captivate. So if you're a law enforcement agency, your police force enables you to have that software, then there's no reason. It's Adobe, part of their Creative Cloud. So if it's a secure, if your network is secure, you don't have to upload the images to the cloud. You have control over who you share them with. But as a training resource, it's one of the best resources that I've seen in my years of training to engage people with. So I really think it's phenomenal, and hopefully I'll get to give you an overview of it today. Because you can actually launch your PowerPoint presentations in Adobe Captivate. You don't have to, they don't have to be separate entities. It's just, it's a fantastic resource.
Excellent. So another question was around our 3D LiDAR measurements and integrated cameras, something you're exploring.
At this present time at DMU, obviously in law enforcement agencies and some institutions might have access to those. We're quite fortunate because we have other virtual resources available to us at DMU. It's not to say that we won't. We're just looking at different resources at this present time. So and obviously I could have said about so much more today. I just wanted to give people a snapshot of some of the things that are freely available, and obviously there are numerous resources which might have a cost to them. So I've tried to give an overview of different avenues for people.
Yeah, absolutely, and that same strand is kind of underpinned by all of our presentations today. So the last question before we pass over to Ian will be in relation to Magic Plan, is this compatible to upload to Canvas, etc.?
Yes, I believe so. We've tried we have Blackboard at DMU, and we've had no issue there. I know other institutions have Canvas, some places have Moodle. So I don't foresee any reason why there'd be an issue. And you can connect to a cloud anyway. So yeah, you have control over the images. So I don't foresee there being any issue. All of our networks now are interactive for different formats. So I haven't seen any issue as such. But let the community know if you try it. We'd love to hear if you try any of these ideas.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll come back to kind of an idea we've got around networking and sharing ideas a little bit later. So fantastic. Thanks so much, Leisa. That's
no problem.
Ian, are you able to turn your camera on?